What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team.
We did it. Sorry, dudes, tech problems. We are finally live, Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We help each other make progress towards our goals as men. Mr. Ray, what's going on, brother?
Wes, it looks like we were just replaying the Trump versus Biden debate there, trying to figure out our devices, huh?
I've only watched like 10 minutes of it. Did you watch it all?
I watched about 5 seconds. And
okay, nice.
Yeah, as my daughter would say, it was giving cringe.
Go
ahead.
I found it pretty interesting. I've watched a reasonable amount of debates, and I think this time they turned off. What's up, brother? They turned off the opposition's mic, and I thought I like that idea. Like, I was always wondering why they don't do that. Well, actually, I'd imagine the reason they do it is because it's more theatrical and like a circus if they don't turn off the mics. But I can appreciate the mic being turned off.
I know, and you're like, I could use one of those at home, huh? One of those.
Yeah.
Turn off her mic.
Yeah. Still, Jared, you could actually both could probably appreciate this. So I went to Alex Shimosi's headquarters on Monday and Tuesday. Got a chance to talk with Alex and Layla. It was super interesting. Walked away with a ton of value. And one of the things that I've been thinking on is now at the office, we have, I think between both of our offices, we have about 11 people, and like taking on board for specifics. And this is going to sound crazy, but it's like, how often in our lives are we telling people, oh, do this generally, or like, this is kind of what I like, versus like, hey, I need you to do this, like this specifically. And sometimes even in this way, because as you're building a business or building a family or building whatever relationship, how often are we leaving these blank spaces for those around us to interpret what we kind of want, and that really resonated with me during the sessions with Alex and Layla. So Jared, does that resonate at all with you, especially because you run a business as well?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you brought that up, because I got a big change going on right now. And some of that had to do with not being clear with expectations with one of the instructors that we had there. My brother and I couldn't figure it out with him, so I decided to move on, actually. And I'm moving to Texas. So I got a real big change going there for me. So yeah, it's exciting, actually.
So you're moving.
It's good. I'm moving. Yep. Yeah.
Tell us about it, man. That's a big change. What's going on there? If whatever details, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. So, like I told you before, I was kind of like the number 2 at a gym before, where my brother and I both were, but then he left to start up this one. And then one of these other instructors went with him. And, the instructor had some issues there too, which is how the classes were run, everybody kind of felt that way. And then we both kind of agreed that the instructor wasn't, living up to expectations and everything, but my brother was just very committed to him for him being the guy that helped him out in the beginning, and like, we both agreed that it wasn't up to par and everything, but I just like, I don't deal well with like in the workplace with people that I know for a fact aren't doing what they should be doing, when we're not providing the best experience for people. And then obviously you guys asked how do Jason and I get along, and brothers never argue or fight or anything, right? So we couldn't figure it out, and I think that just got a little too difficult for both of us. And before it got any worse than it already was getting, I was just decided to quit. Offered to help out for a little bit longer, but yeah, and that was obviously really scary when that happened, because I was like, all right, well, what now? So I messaged just some other people that I know within the jiu-jitsu community, and one of my buddies that I've known for a long time made me a good offer down in Texas. He just opened up his second location, so I'm going to be there bouncing back and forth between those, doing a lot of good stuff. So it's actually good news in the end. So
yeah, how are you feeling about all of it? And where do you live right now?
Iowa.
So you're making a big move. When are you making the move, and how are you feeling about it?
I feel great about it. The worst part is just obviously arguing with your brother. That relationship now having like a big kind of problem there. Moving away from my niece, that's actually probably one of the saddest parts. But overall, really good. Like career wise, future wise, it's really good. Outside of like being in the military, I've never like lived outside of Iowa, so I'm excited for that. And my friend I've known we actually helped like each other get into jiu-jitsu. We were making pizza together before jiu-jitsu, and kind of talked each other into starting and everything. So I've known him for a long time, so it's really good.
Awesome. And if you don't mind me asking,
and I fly out July 16th to answer that question.
Awesome. If you don't mind me asking, is the loop fully closed and mended between you and your brother?
Oh, no, nothing's mended right now.
Okay.
But, time, give everything time. I think his daughter, my niece, I think will be a really good kind of buffer between the two of us to hopefully eventually kind of help that. I'm still visiting her from time to time, so.
Yeah. Do you mind if Ray and I comment on it? Just get our perspectives. Are you cool with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Ray, I know that probably this might strike a chord with you, if you don't mind me saying that. What's your perspective on Jared's situation?
Definitely relatable. Jared, I applaud you for taking the initiative, moving to Texas. That has, I'm sure by every metric, it's got a more robust economy than Iowa. And so from a macro level, I'm sure Wes would agree that you're going into a more fertile, farm country. More fertile, I'm trying to use a corn metaphor, but anyway, more fertile economy, more fertile opportunity environment. So I'm sure Wes would be encouraged by that. In terms of the brother dynamic, I wish I'm an expert in like sour relationships. I'm not an expert in like healing them. So
feels good, doesn't it?
Oh, it stinks, man. It stinks. But if I could give advice to somebody else that I didn't follow myself, it would be like, don't wait for the other guy to apologize. Like, own your side of the street, keep your side of the street clean. If at all possible, like, apologize for your role in it. And that is different than being a doormat, right? If you can just like think honestly about what you could have done better, I think there's a way to do that doesn't make excuses for his behavior. I'm sure at some level it feels like he's picking his kind of colleague over his brother, which stinks. Again, there's like, it's a mirror image of what's going on with me and my brother. It's been 5 years, or it's been 3.5 years. We're still not talking. So, that's what not to do.
Yeah, I'd be curious we talked about scaffolding, the model of scaffolding relationships, probably months ago at this point. And I sort of had to think through several of my relationships through this model. And for those of you who didn't hear that, basically, like if you walk through New York City, there's always building construction going on. So there's always scaffolding on the side of whatever, skyscraper they're building or rebuilding there. So the scaffolding has to work like in layers. And you can imagine, like, the higher the scaffolding goes, the more risk you're taking of it just not working. Because eventually, right, you're at such like altitude, right? Like, gravity starts to take over. So I thought of that for some relationships of mine. Like I can only go up so many layers of scaffolding with certain relationships, and then it starts to get a little wonky. So what I have found is if I kept on trying to build on top of that weak scaffolding, let's say past the 5th floor, then it inevitably would not work. So, but I would keep on blaming everything else except for me, just realizing like I'm not acknowledging gravity. So then finally, after, probably many years of like battling with this, I was like, oh, maybe I just need to take certain relationships down to the fundamental scaffolding that can exist and not collapse under its own weight. So Jared, to be fair to you and your brother, when you are in a business with family, that's like a level of scaffolding that only, that some of like the world's greatest rock climbers, would not be able to necessarily hang in there at that altitude. It is a very hard thing because running a business together is not a normal cadence and speed and all these other things that a normal human relationship entails, because the decision-making usually is so compressed and there's more stress involved because there's money, right? So it's a very fascinating and challenging dynamic to run with a family member. So I would just say that as kind of a brother in this fight with you, is like, I'm sure you already are, but maybe have some grace towards the relationship and realize it's not you and or your brother, it's the freaking dynamic, that you guys put yourselves in a roller coaster together. And I would hate for either of you to blame the other party rather than just acknowledge that, hey, this roller coaster is really fucking hard to begin with. Very few people get out on the other side of that.
Wes,
so I don't know if any of that
that's
helps, but.
Excellent. That's an excellent metaphor. And I'm listening just as hard as Jared is with that. Another thing that comes to mind, Wes, that you often talk about is like, I'm thinking that when you're in business or get on that roller coaster with a sibling, you're trying to jam an emotional relationship into a rational relationship, or jam an emotional relationship into what is required, in fact, is a rational relationship.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's very similar. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this. When like a couple gets in a fight and they were both drunk the night before, they tend not to blame the alcohol. It's like, we should acknowledge that component, right? Because we probably never would have said those things had it not been for the alcohol. And even when people do kind of acknowledge it, like, yeah, but it's like, no, you poisoned your brain. Right. Like, and if you like, so anyway, just if you don't mind me saying that, like give you and your brother some grace, because it's very likely not you and or your brother. It's very likely just the circumstance and the mechanism through which you guys were relating called business. Jared, what are your thoughts?
No, it was good. Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I know that I once I get mad, it's like, I'm just there now, and like, and then I just like, don't usually handle the anger very well or anything. So I did try to extend the olive branch, the day after I quit. I was like, look, I can come back for a couple months before I leave. We can fill up the classes as best we can, knock out all the leads and try to do that. But, he turned that down. But then eventually he did, just a few days ago, invite me to my other niece's, his stepdaughter's birthday party, which I declined. But, so I think we'll get there eventually. It's a bummer because we really are good friends, he's like one of my best friends. Like, if I were to think about who I would spend the rest of my time talking to, like it'd be him. Like we've always been really close. So I'm sure down the road it'll straighten itself out. But of course we got to work on that together. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, man, I would lean on you to perhaps consider, like, give yourself more credit for being a leader and like really step into that leadership role, because what's coming up for me is I have a funny feeling that if you just let this thing kind of simmer its way down to a tolerable level, that's one thing, but you're also about to move far away. And I would hate to see if there was an alternative route that was just like, hey man, let's attack this together. I'm going to lock you and I in a room and maybe we fist fight. Maybe we put each other in a fucking chokehold or something like that. Right. But like, let's nail this thing out, because I have a funny feeling that, especially if you consider this got to be your best friend, of like, could it be solved in a day rather than in a decade? And I have a funny feeling that it could be solved in a day. That's my guess. I know nothing about the context, obviously. I would just hate to see you have to pause your relationship with your best friend for what seems like being left to the chances of whatever the wind blows you guys in the direction of. So yeah, I agree with Kaizen, right? Like in the comments right now, he's saying, remind him that you love him first. And work from there. And yeah, it's crazy what an authentic apology and or like, I love you, does, as much as it sucks to say that sometimes, especially as a man, but it's unbelievable how much it can shortcut things oftentimes. Ray, what's your thoughts?
Hey dudes, sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to romasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Oh, damn. Kaizen got me, man. He got me right between the ribs on that one. He pierced my frozen exterior. Goddamn. Yeah, Jared, I would say act fast, man, before you move, before
that's what everybody keeps saying. So everybody else is wrong and I'm still right. Yeah. And then, just before the distance gets calcified. And look, like what you're saying about your brother is the same as me, and it's been a couple of years, and okay, is it the end of the world? Is it? No, because I can avoid the same mistake in other relationships. So if there is a resentment, if there is a beef in other areas of my life, on my best days, I neutralize it as quickly as possible, So whenever my wife and I get in an argument now, on my best days, I can apologize for my role in that. Now, that doesn't mean you were right, I was wrong, please take me back. It simply means I'm sorry for losing my cool back there. Right? So it has the word I'm sorry, which is an apology. For losing my cool, which means it doesn't mean they were right, or it doesn't mean that you had right. Your response was uncalled for. Maybe your response was correct, but personally, I think losing my cool hands the victory to the other person. Right? Like imagine getting flustered and losing your cool on the mat. Right? Are you more effective that way? Probably not. Right? So yeah. And so kind of drifting here, but act as quickly as possible, own your shit, and whatever happened on your side of the street, own that and apologize for that. And then practice that in all your relationships.
Yeah, and Ray, to piggyback off of that, Jared, I don't know if you've ever tried this, but I use flow charting all the time in my relationships. It's incredibly tedious. It's incredibly awkward at times because usually like the other party is not used to it. But I can tell you it's been incredibly helpful for me. So flow charting in relationships is like, okay, first I will go back and literally flow chart out, right, the immediate moments before we got into the conflict and then where the conflict started, if that makes sense. So, and for those who don't know, flow charting is like, let's say a basic breakdown is just drawing out through a series of squares and arrows the exact sequence to your memory that, you know, that you could jot down on a piece of paper. And when I do this with people, especially like, let's say with my girlfriend, it's really helpful because then you can do it together and you could say, okay, here's my recollection of what happened. You walked in the door, said hi, and for some reason I got triggered by that. But then like flow charting the subconscious as well. So, and it's crazy. It usually shows, oh, at a subconscious level, when you said this, I felt this because it reminded me of whatever, childhood, or remind me of last week when you didn't do the wash or whatever like that. And then I did this. So you can really see where shit started to go haywire. If you're being honest, that is hard, right? That's really hard because it's actually in the invisible micro moments and like it's a snap in time, right? That everything went wrong. So then in the flow chart, when at that point I draw like a big tornado, because it's like, yeah, because otherwise it's like, well, then you said this and then I said this and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, we weren't really mad at that, right? When you told me, right, whatever, right, like I never do this. That wasn't the issue. That was you trying to hurt me, and I was trying to hurt you back. That's disregarded, right? That's when we are drunk in rage, right? Versus if you look right before that, it's like, oh, okay, when you didn't show up on time, that triggered me, and then I responded to that. So anyway, I'd be curious if you did that flow chart, Jared. Very often you will find that there is an apology there, either on both sides, and it's usually easy. It's like, oh, because this is where I felt hurt, and then I felt so hurt that I turned it into anger to protect myself because being angry feels better, right? Because then I can just go Hulk mode rather than just being sad, right? So I'm sorry for that. But sometimes what flow charting does is it just logically brings you down to a level of, oh, we just have a fundamental disagreement on this particular value. And that's okay. And that might be unsolvable, as John Gottman calls, what does he call it? He calls it gridlock. So certain things, it's like, if we're in a flow chart together and we see it's like, oh, you just like chocolate ice cream and I like vanilla ice cream, we're never going to fix that. And that's okay. As long as we know it's just like you like chocolate and I like vanilla. Now that might mean that we can no longer run a jiu-jitsu gym together. Maybe, right? But that's usually the exception, not the rule. It's usually relationships get broken up because of some sort of disagreement that otherwise would have been solvable, but it became unsolvable because of emotional reaction. That's my guess. Jared, what comes up for you when I say that?
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. Like, you know, when it happened fast. You know, it's just like he said something, I said something, and it was like, well, now we're done, you know, and then I just walked out. And we had obviously had a few meetings about this, you know, like it was building up to it slowly, you know, and we were communicating about it. But then when it happened, it just happened, you know. And like, you know, I did apologize. I apologized for the way that I acted during it, but you know, it was baseline apology, you know, just
right.
Sorry for the way I was, you know. So yeah, I think like, a more sincere apology. And especially now that I think we've both calmed down, like, you know, I was the first one to extend that olive branch, and then he eventually sent it back to me a little bit later. So, you know, I'm sure we'll get together before I leave, because like you said, if I go all the way to Texas, there's like too much distance there. And, a phone call or something like that isn't near as good as, being in person. So my mom's pushing for that too.
Funny?
So.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? Have you guys ever found yourselves in like the part of the flow chart that's like, you gave a bullshit apology but then you use that right later on, be like, I apologize. What else do you want me to do? It's like not acknowledging at all that it was not a real apology, just some bullshit apologies. It's so fascinating. It's like there's nothing else I can say.
I'm
now
sorry.
It's on you. Yeah. Ray, what's your perspective on that? Have you given a bullshit apology and then referenced it as it was an asset instead of a liability later on in the argument?
Yeah, it's like phoning it in, right?
Yep.
It reminds me of like when you're working from home and you just like pound out 3 emails in the morning so you can go back to sleep, but it looks like you're at work, right? Yeah. I think what comes to mind for me is that it's just there's plenty of work to be done on your side, Jared. Like Wes said, understanding why you reacted the way you reacted, owning that, and ideally he'll do a similar process on his side, and you guys can meet in the middle. And but that is not something you can control, right? You can only control what you do, and so that's why I would 100% agree. Like, reflect on why it became a fight. Think about don't let it become a resentment. Don't let it become a cancer. Right. And then just like kind of apologize for your role and be open to receiving the same. And I think it's like, I think what I've seen in myself and in others in the past is when we wait for the other person to apologize, when we wait for because of course, for a lot of us, our default position is I was wronged. I shall wait on my throne of righteousness for them to come and apologize to me. Right. But if you can just like crack the door a little bit by saying, I lost my cool. That was dumb. I'm embarrassed by how I acted. It gives the opportunity for like a real speedy resolution.
Right. And something to add here. I thought Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger had a brilliant partnership. I forget how many decades they had, and they made quite literally billions of dollars together, like very literally. And one time they were interviewed and they were asked what their secret was. And Warren Buffett said something along the lines of, we started our partnership and we were both very rational. And we understood because for context, Warren Buffett is arguably the best investor of all time. And his partner, Charlie Munger, who recently passed away, was in a similar, he's very similar in the Investor Hall of Fame. They analyze businesses for a living. And they said that we found that if businesses and partnerships could avoid just 5 or 6 major catastrophic arguments, then they can become multi-billion-dollar companies. So they knew that ahead of time. So they basically said, hey, okay, if we feel we're getting into the red zone of any of those 5 or 6, we just know, okay, this is just one of the 5 that we have to avoid. So if Ray feels so strongly about something, and I know that I don't feel as strong, but still I feel strong about it, maybe I just give it to Ray and then we just check it off we just avoided the iceberg. But I think what happens is if we don't take a macro view, right, then we're going to die on those hills. We're not realizing, hey, all you have to do is avoid 5 icebergs. And then on the Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger side, they got to enjoy many billions of dollars of upside as a result. So if we map that onto our personal relationships, like think about how much equity we could build in relationships. If we just knew that every single relationship is going to have those icebergs in advance, and we were just able to avoid them from a graceful perspective and or apologize when needed and just say, hey man, this is one of our 5, right? So let's just get around it. This happens in all relationships, but I'm not willing to sacrifice the billions of dollars of equity that we could build together for this one thing.
Yeah. And that's a businessman here that I know has a bunch of kind of maxims like that. And for that specific scenario, he calls it profit before pride. Right. And yeah. And so Jared, another point of analysis is like, is it an older brother or younger brother you're dealing with?
Younger brother. Okay. I'm the middle of 3.
Okay. So I'm the middle of 3.
You see my problem.
Yeah, no, I'm the middle of 3 boys too, dude. It's like it's like an episode of The Twilight Zone where we're both given the same kind of script. So yeah, another part of the analysis is like, what role did my pride, like I think some Kaizen might have called it ego, but what role did pride play in this, right? And like you going to take orders from your younger brother? I don't think so, man. Right. And then you're going to die on that hill. Like, and again, like, do you really want to die on that hill? And again, this is not stuff that I have succeeded in doing in like in my relationship with my brother, but I think I've learned from it and figured out like, my relationship with my daughter, for example, I'll die on that hill. That's one that I'll fight for. That's one I will die nobly for or live humbly for. Right. Anything else, I have to take the longer view. Yeah. So those are some thoughts. Profit before pride. And it should be practically everything before pride, really, because pride is like a very dark set of sunglasses that when we throw them on and we're like, I'm Mr. Cool and I'm not taking shit from anybody. It's hard to see. It's hard to, right?
Right. And I want to add this to the conversation as well, because for some of you might be thinking, if you think about John Gottman's work and they talk about stonewalling, I have a particular problem with stonewalling. I think it requires more nuance, but maybe I just don't understand it as deeply as I should. So I believe that some relationships, maybe even all relationships, should be run like the Freemasons run their rules. I used to be a Freemason, and we had pretty strict rules on you're not allowed at the meetings, you're not allowed to talk about religion, and you're not allowed to talk about politics. Those were like no-go zones. So I actually like that idea of like in basically all relationships, hey, if we go into that zone, we're not coming out alive, right? Let's just know that in advance. I mean, how many relationships have probably been broken up because of politics or a certain politician, maybe a politician that's currently running for office? That seems crazy to me, right? Like knowing that if we start to talk about this, just know that I'm not going to participate. And you might consider that to be stonewalling. I consider that to be protecting our relationship. So Jared, maybe in this particular case, it's like, hey bro, let me apologize. Know that I love you. Just know that this was coming from a place of sadness. And Jared, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just making this up. But hey man, maybe it's that we can't talk about this topic again, right? Or this genre of topic, or maybe it means we can't work together. I have no idea what it is for you, but I'm saying like, I like protected pockets of relationships that are kind of like that land in the elephant graveyard in The Lion King. It's like, if you go there, that's where the hyenas are. You don't go there. Right? And then when you go there, you learn your lesson. So I wonder if there should be protected zones. Ray, what do you think about protected zones in relationships?
Yeah, I think it's spot on. And that doesn't only apply to relationships, right? That applies to your own. I mean, what are you protecting? You're protecting your own sanity as well, right? Like, for example, a scenario that comes to mind is if you have a buddy who got divorced, and all he complains about is how his ex is like, doing this or doing that. That's an example of a situation where you put a electric fence around that topic, because it's just like, you do not want a relationship with your homie where all you ever hear about is his so-and-so ex trying to screw him this way and that way. So I think while I cannot relate to the Lion King imagery, like, I absolutely agree that there's a difference between stonewalling and like taking yourself out of a conversation, and especially like when it comes to two people that you love who are arguing about something. So two people that you love, if your brother and sister are arguing about what we should do about mom and dad's house, or putting mom and dad in a home or something, I think you're perfectly entitled to take yourself out of the conversation rather than being forced to die on that hill, which is like, take your sister's side or take your brother's side and forever alienate one over the other. Right. I think there's a distinction between stonewalling and taking yourself out of the debate, like kind of exiting with love. Right. Stonewalling specifically is shutting down emotionally in the hopes that the other person runs out of gas. So, I mean, I think I can certainly relate to, climbing into bed at night and having survived, another night of like awkward tension or avoidance with a spouse. And then once you're kind of in bed, then it's the kind of laundry list of complaints or things you haven't done or things that's worrying her. And, that kind of like pretending to go to sleep kind of move, just in the hope that they run out of gas and stop kind of lecturing you. That's stonewalling. And it's a short-term unhealthy move.
That's interesting. I want to come back to that in a second, but Jared, what's coming up for you as we're talking through all this?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's a good idea, like the graveyard thing, like probably just agree to disagree on this, and be like, we're never going to agree with how we should have handled the situation there with the other instructor. But, I think it helps a lot that I have a good place to go. It was really scary the first day. I was like furious because I was like, what am I going to do now? I got to find a thing, but I got this really good thing going. So that'll really help a lot. But yeah, I know that I got to reach out to him again with a little more sincere apology, and but probably at least not trying to discuss that problem before I leave, just keep it like a brotherly conversation, talk about the things we like, have the niece there. That way we don't punch each other. And yeah.
Well,
it's tricky because we really do get along well, like everything was great. We just couldn't figure out what to do about this instructor. We just didn't agree on that. So,
yeah. I'm
a psycho,
Jared.
So,
yeah. Well, it's funny, man. Like, because I would nudge on you a little bit there, because as I tell everybody, I will always do my best just to tell you what comes up for me and in a non-judgmental way. I know you're saying that, like, hey, our relationship is phenomenal. This is my best friend, and we're just never going to agree on this particular thing. And I would say maybe that's true. And obviously I don't know anything about the situation, but I have often found that's actually not true, right? That very rarely does it come down to, well, we just have a fundamentally different religious view on this, right? Do you know what I mean? Of like, very rarely is it that, oh, you just like chocolate and I like vanilla. It is 95% of the time, it's, you hurt me. It's not that we fundamentally disagree on this, and we therefore never will. It's I was sad when you did this. And for a man, that is like almost impossible to say, at least from where I grew up. Like, you just do not say you're like, I'm sad. You do not say that, right? Way better, right? Way better of a story. Like, yeah, so I punched a hole in the wall, right? Like, versus saying like, I'm sad and I cried about it. So I'd be curious, man, if you examined that. Like, is it really that you just fundamentally disagree on something and it can never be resolved because it comes down to like elemental principles that are just opposite? Ray, what comes up for you with that statement?
Well, I think I'm now realizing that I'm looking at Jared's situation from a different point of view, and Jared, I'll just, again, I'm relating it to my experience, my estrangement from my brother, and how that went down, right? So my brother was living with my wife and I, working on our house, and a catastrophic fight occurred, and we had to throw him out. I'm like removing all the he said, she said, and who's right and who's wrong. To him, I can see that he might have felt like I sided with my wife over my brother, right? And I'm not putting words in your mouth, but there may be some situation where your bro sided with this instructor instead of you. And so,
of course, yeah.
So the question that I asked, so I'm actually your brother in this scenario. I'm not you. And so if I'm your brother, like, I guess I wonder, what would I want Jared to do? You know, to open the door, to kind of defrost the relationship. Yeah, so that I'm just trying to navigate this like emotional kind of minefield in real time. But like, so I guess, yeah. Wes, I guess my argument for, I mean, again, I emotional shutting down and rage is just the default kind of like switch that I'm flicking in my brain here, right? But like, I guess, so I can't talk to you, Jared, because it's just too radioactive. But Wes, what I would say to Jared is like, I don't know, don't shut off the lights and lock the doors on this relationship. Like, keep the door open, keep the lights on. Yeah, I don't know, Wes. It's too much for me today.
And Jared, I totally respect number one, because if I were in your shoes right now, what would be going on in my head is like, oh, you guys just don't know, right? You don't know all the stuff that was said. You don't know all the baggage. And I agree with that, you know, if that's any part of the narrative for you. So I really admire how much you're able to kind of sit in the pocket of this. If you don't mind me asking, like, how much of it for you, so we can all learn as men, like, how much of it for you of that pie chart is, hey, my brother chose somebody else over me?
99.9.
Yeah. So
because that's eventually what it got left up to, you know. So
right.
Yeah. And it was because, like, so, you know, the thing leading up to it was like, so we agree that I'm like I have more value here and everything. This guy isn't doing what he needs to be doing and everything, but we're still gonna let me walk, you know.
Okay, so Jared, what do you want from me? What would you like your brother to do or say? Like, if it's 99%, he picked this instructor over kin. Like, what would you want from your brother to heal whatever hurt you're feeling? Or
I don't know. That's a tough question. Yeah, I really don't know how to answer that one.
Because like, do you want him to fire the other guy and take you back? You know, beg you to stay. You know.
Again, without getting into too much like he said, she said, I eventually was just like, will you have a God's honest conversation with this guy and explain to him why he's driving people away from the business, you know? And like, he didn't even want to do that because this guy is not very easy to talk to. So it's like, I obviously I didn't think that the guy was the best for the business and probably shouldn't have been there anymore. But, firing him now isn't what I want. Ideally, and part of my fear is that this guy truly isn't good enough. I know that people quit because of him and that he'll continue to hurt the business. And eventually my brother's business will suffer. Things won't go well there. And, I'm just like catastrophizing everything down the road and seeing how everything crumbles for him. And, that's scary for me. That's one of the biggest things. It's like fear for him and that. But I think a positive spin is that maybe this is the thing that gets everybody to step up and be like, okay, we got to fix something here because the program director who was doing all these things left because of this. So maybe things get better and everything, works out and, and maybe we would have eventually had a problem anyway, because we're brothers and it's hard to do business with really good friends and family, so.
Yeah, and question: have you seen the Karate Kid reboot, Cobra Kai, the series on Netflix?
The first season was really good. I like that one.
Dude, there's layers. There's layers of this is like life imitating art or art imitating life. This is ripped from the script of Cobra Kai.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Because this might be helpful. It's been really helpful for me of removing it from you are this to there's a pattern of the relationship. Let's put it on paper and let's dissect it and not judge the morality of it, but give an honest accounting of whether or not it is functional towards our goal or dysfunctional towards our goal. Now there's a sub level of that, which in my view goes something like this. You have to overlap, in my opinion, a hierarchy of decision makers. So, and this is a hard pill to swallow. Now, I do believe hierarchies should exist in certain games, right? Not in overall life, but I'm saying in certain games. So let's just say if it's for the business, right? As an example, I will have, I'm going to change this. So Matt, for example, right? Matt McCusker, we were talking and this was a while ago and he's like, dude, it's so annoying. How many people will come up to me and say, you should tell this joke, right? Which I didn't even know this was a thing, right? He was like, yeah, it happens all the time. Oh, it'd be funny if you do this. And he vetoes it because that person just has no idea about the iceberg under the water of what every single joke, how it's built, the tonality, the cadence, all of these things, rather than hey man, it'd be really funny if you told this joke about a pencil or whatever. You know what I mean? That's you have no idea. I appreciate the concept here, but there's certain areas that require vetoing. And oftentimes that person who's giving the suggestion, particularly if the receiver is not well versed in emotional and interpersonal relationships, if they just say no, right, it usually makes the person who's recommending the thing feel heavily rejected. But I can relate to Matt in this particular case, right? Running a business, as you could probably imagine, it's almost on a daily basis where somebody says, hey, you should do this, or hey, there's this problem over here. And I've actually had to have this conversation recently with a person. It's the classic, it's not lost on me, right? We are not $1 billion company. I'm very aware that there are things that we could do to get to $1 billion. That's not the brilliant idea. It's bring the solution. And then how about this? How about you execute the solution? And you will find out that there's roadblocks to this idea. And that's okay. But it's so easy to say, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, when you're not in the driver's seat. Now, just to be clear, Jared, I'm not taking your brother's side on that, but I'm wondering if he were in this conversation, if he would say, hey, there's just logistical things that right now I can't solve this problem. I have to put this on ice because I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got the rent of the dojo to pay. I've got all these other things that right now I just can't solve this. And I know my brother Jared is telling me to do these things, but like, and honestly, Jared, he might not even be capable of it because some of this stuff is hard. I had an employee actually tell me 2 days ago, it's like, oh, let's bring on this person. And then if they don't work out, just fire them. I'm like, look, have you ever fired somebody? It's not pleasant. It takes you 5 seconds to say, right? But like, and how would you feel if we were just testing you and then 3 months down the line, we fired you? It's not an easy fucking thing to do, right? So please don't just say it like I should do that and pay the money in between and then do all the work and then just fire this person when they're relying on me to now help pay their mortgage. Do you know what I mean? So it's like some of those things until you're in that seat, it's hard to relate to. But Jared, what's your perspective on that? Again, not taking your brother's side, but I'm wondering what he would say if he were in this conversation.
Yeah. So, I obviously, like, leading up to everything, I was like looking at things through his eyes, right? It's like, you have this, you have that. Like, I see the loyalty to this guy. He helped you out, in the beginning, all that. And I've been there too. Like when I managed like pizza restaurants, I had some people that really sucked. And then like when the owner was like, all right, so like, all right, like you have the final word. Do I get rid of them? And I was like, no, they're fine. We'll figure it out, because it's a hard thing to do to someone. And I was also like watching some Alex Hormozy videos, and like they also talk about how sometimes that's the biggest mistake that business owners make, though, is they have somebody that they stay loyal to for way too long because they were here in the beginning or whatever, and they're not up to par, So, and that's where I still believe we were, where it's like, look, I get that this person did this and that, but we know why people leave, and they're named as the reason why customers, members are leaving. That's not good. But yeah, anyway, yeah, it's a tough thing to do. And like, it's funny that you said the mortgage thing, because my brother and his wife did just close on their house like a little bit before that. Like, we had all this stuff. And of course I was like, I can do everything this guy is doing. It's not hard for me. I have the time and energy, he's just teaching, 6 hours a week. Like I can do that. But again, I obviously, like, once I get mad about something, like I try to keep it under control, but I'm just, he knows me. I think like Tyson said, brothers know you better than anyone. And he can see, he's like, oh, there's angry Jared again. Like there's the rage. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no. And that's hard. I mean, I would also nudge on you a little bit, because I think Ray asked a brilliant question of like, hey, what would you want your brother to do? And, I say that's out of love. You couldn't answer it. And how many times are we in relationship dynamics where it's like, I need you to do this. And then the person's like, well, do what? And there's no level of clarity. And it's like, well, I need you to figure out how to make me happy in perpetuity. That's what I need from you, And it's hard. It's so damn hard, man. So, cause I would ask maybe you and your brother to give yourselves a little bit of grace. It's like, if you can't articulate what you actually need, he probably can't either. So I wonder if you guys can figure that part out too. Do you know what I mean? Like, get the apologies over with. And then it's like, what do we actually want from each other?
I think we can. Like him inviting me to, his stepdaughter's birthday was, a big thing. And he was like, he was like, it sucks that things didn't work out and everything, but I don't, want to lose out on any brother/uncle relationships and stuff. And then I just responded with a very short decline of the offer, but I got to sort that out. So.
Yeah, I would ask you, because this is a really interesting piece, and this will be my final thought on this, if that's cool. John Gottman calls those a bid for connection, right? Your brother inviting you to that was 100% a bid for connection.
I love the Gottman stuff you guys were talking about, by the way. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, heck yeah. Sweet. It's funny, man, because when somebody makes a bid for connection, that it obviously is their olive branch. When you just take that olive branch and you fucking break it, it actually escalates the war even more, because then it leaves the other person be like, okay, now I can't do any, that's how they feel. It's like, well, I tried, right? And I even tried doing this, even when so my thought would be, when somebody gives you a bid for connection, is there a way to accept it that's still not inauthentic, you can still kind of be upset, but you can still hold the other person's hand. Right. You know what I mean? I think there's an area in there, because oftentimes what happens is like, I don't want to accept your stupid bit for connection because I still hate you, right? Like something like that. But if you completely reject it, we just know where that goes, versus being able to gracefully accept it, maybe still under some context and some disclaimers. But I think there's a way of accepting that. Ray, let me pass you the mic, man. Final words of wisdom on this.
Well, again, all of this applies to my estrangement from my brother. And Jared, I would encourage you to reconsider the niece's birthday, because like I find myself wanting
to unfortunately it's already passed, but
okay, so well, here we go.
But don't worry, I will reach out. I will see him before we leave. I will do that.
Okay, good. But like I find myself wanting to use my daughter as a kind of like wedge or weapon, like, right? Or as a bargaining chip, or like feeling some sick sense of satisfaction. Well, he's never going to have a relationship with his niece because he pissed me off. And so I'm taking that away from him. It sounds like your brother was trying not to do that, or was like the birthday party was like an invitation not to have that dynamic. If it happened, if the niece's birthday party was too soon after the rift occurred, forgive yourself. That's totally understandable. You can learn a lot about yourself and what, like your origin story and what motivates you and the family dynamics and how you've been shaped by them through this experience. I'm impressed that you brought this to the group, because there's a very different dialogue or monologue that goes on in our heads, right? It's all rage and Rambo and like one-liners and like, right, and kill shots, like when we let it just fester in our head. So I'm really happy that you brought it to the group. Give yourself a break. You're a human. Give your brother a break. He's human. There may be great opportunities that await you, because you're not trying to jam a like family emotional relationship into a business rational relationship. So there might be great good that comes out of this. And so and I'm thinking for myself, like, in the last 4 years, have I been on a road to independence and like growing up myself and kind of like emerging from the shadow of my family into my own man? And yeah, I think there has been. And I think that is one of the upsides that awaits on this chapter of your hero's journey.
Spot on. Jared, final words of wisdom, buddy.
I thought you guys were going to tell me I was right about everything. Just appreciate it. Like, that's, this is roughly what I, thought I would hear. Like I know what I got to do. Like, in your heart, what's right. Like, when I declined the birthday party, I was like, being a little bitch right now, aren't I? We'll straighten it out.
I would be curious. My final piece here. I wonder if it'd be cool if it wasn't just like, hey, let's get together for coffee before I go off to Texas. If it was like, hey man, I'm really sorry, and even more sorry about missing the event. I wonder what it would be like if you could create your own little event, maybe take them out to dinner or something. And with the niece, it was a niece's event, right? With the niece included. Something. Yeah,
I'm still like seeing the nieces like go over to my mom's when she has them and stuff. So they know that I'm hanging out with the girls. I'm just not doing it, with him. But yeah.
All right, cool.
And I guess what comes to mind for me, little PS here, is that like, if my ego and my kind of wounded lower self wants to kind of snatch away the relationship that my brother can have with my daughter, the niece uncle, maybe the right thing will be to do is to just like let them have a uncle niece relationship and let that be a kind of healing and a kind of peace, even if the two brothers can't have peace at this moment. And so Jared, again, thank you, dude. again, you might have come to this group today asking for help with your situation, but you actually helped me by talking about the most uncomfortable subject, and forcing me to kind of shine some light on it. And so, like, I really appreciate you coming to the group today with this, because you've helped me immensely, dude. And Wes, you were kind of, you're a passenger on the help train. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just disappointed you said that the graveyard analogy didn't work. I mean, come on, the Lion King with,
it was great.
Simba, you have everything.
Great.
You have access to all the land where the light touches. Don't go to the Shadowlands. Like, come on, man.
No, I love that. No,
analogy.
It doesn't come close to Andrew's dark playground metaphor. That's still with me. Yeah. I think about that every day. Yeah. But I mean, it was great. Like, for those who remember that scene, I just don't remember the scene, but you had rich texture, like elephant bones, kind of big African trees, shadowy, and then like little eyes of the
the whites of the eyes. Yeah.
It was good. It was good, man. It was good. That's on me.
Thanks, man. I needed that. All right, dudes. I love you guys. Jared, thanks so much, man, for the vulnerability.
Thank you, Jared.
And transparency. Like, that'll help.
Thank you, guys.
That helped me, help Ray, help a lot of us. Thank you, brother. You guys have a great weekend. Love you, dudes. Later.